Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Don't Make Me Famous, where we talk about the road to Hollywood for Latinos as I navigate it myself. So, today we're going to talk about advice. This is probably one of the most separating issues that I try to avoid slash also go into for certain people. So advice is a tricky one, right? Because there's definitely what you would think is good advice, right? There's bad advice. Like, a dude gave me bad advice. She gave me great advice. Everything in between. And I wanted to talk about that today because in this industry, in this industry, there's always a lot of advice being thrown around. Myself included. If I love you and I feel like I have an opening and I see that you're trying to do something and I see that you're maybe setting me up for some sort of advice for me to give you, I might. It doesn't happen all the time because I know this next thing that I'm about to tell you that, and that's that most people don't fucking want advice. Call me crazy. I'm one of those, by the way. I'm absolutely guilty of that shit. I do not like unsolicited advice. It's one of the things that grinds my gears, to quote Peter Griffin. And I think to myself sometimes, should it? Should it really get me upset? Should I take all advice that comes my way? Those are the questions that I always try to kind of think about when it comes to that topic. So let's get right into it. So let's start with bad advice. Bad advice, stop me if you've heard this. You can't do that. You shouldn't do that. That's not what I would do. Man, I heard that somebody else did something like that and it didn't work out for them. All that shit is fear-based. Just fear-based. It's one of those what they would do type of situations where it has nothing to do with the person that's being given the bad advice. It has nothing to do with your personal ability, their belief in you, anything, none of that. So don't take it personal. It's going to feel personal. But it's all being put, whether it's bad or good, it's all being put through that person's filter. And that person's filter is what they've been through in life, their childhood, their bad or good relationships, their successes and their failures and their fears, some accomplishments. It all goes through that filter and it ends up being what they wouldn't do. And I find it's usually that they are not able to do what you're doing. They're not able to understand what you're doing. And it's not a requirement. They do not need to know or have an understanding of what you're doing as an artist, whether you're acting, writing, directing, whatever, producing, it doesn't matter. Nobody understands your vision because it's your vision. Nobody, nor should they. This is your thing. So even as I give advice, you shouldn't listen to me because it might be bad for you. You might be taking it as bad advice, and that's totally fine. That's fair. That's totally fair. Because what is great advice to one person is dog shit advice for another person. And you have to understand that. That comes with it. So don't take it personal. Again, it's going to feel personal, but don't take it personal because these folks are trying to protect you from what? I don't know, from making a mistake that may never come. But also, in that same vein, you don't want to stop somebody from making a mistake because that's how they learn, right? So that whole, I just don't want you to, nothing. I hope that you go through something in your pursuit of whatever you're trying to do. Like you need to. It's a growth that happens when you fail at something. Whether you succeed or not, it's a growth that happens with that that comes with experience. So for somebody to try to keep you from that type of lesson, man, like it's just smile, wave, appreciate it, or find a way to tell them, hey, I got this. I don't, don't be a dick about it. Don't be a dick. But also kind of let them know, like, hey, look, it's totally fine. If I fail, that's fine. It's not the end of the world. And even if something's like, I don't know, coming from it that costs you some type of like real pain, financially or, professionally, that's fine too. That was in the cards. You might learn from that. You will learn from that. But it's going to be something that is ultimately going to give you a net positive if you take it that way. Some people cannot take failure, but that's a different video. So that's bad advice. It's never something that they understand. Because if it was, then it would be good advice. Because and that's a good segue into good advice. So good advice. It's usually something that comes from a person that you trust. Right? A person that you trust, they have some sort of success in whatever that topic is. In our industry, writing, producing, directing, acting, those are people that you want to actually learn from. You want to learn from them because they have a story. They have almost a formula, or at least pieces that you could draw from. Not to say that you can't get stuff from the bad advice, because at least there you're like, you know what? Now I kind of know what to avoid or who to avoid. So it's not like bad advice is not necessarily all the way bad. It just comes with a little bit of a puzzle that you got to solve, in the sense that like, well, all right, this person might be full of shit with whatever this, form of advice that they're giving me, and they have well-meaning, but at least it should give you some sort of lesson that you could apply. So it's like bad advice is like 90% bad, 10%. If you look at it the right way, you'll get something from it. But good advice is not rooted in fear, and that's, I think, the biggest thing with that. It's hopefully will build on momentum that you're going through. That person might see you and might spark an idea in them so that they can give you some sort of like, hey, you know what? I saw that you were doing this. Have you ever looked at this? Have you ever thought about that? I saw this thing. I heard this thing. I read this book. I heard this song. I watched this show, movie, documentary, and it reminded me of what you're doing, or it sparked something, something that gives a conversation. That type of stuff is gold. So that's the good advice. That's the stuff that really, really kind of feels effortless. It doesn't feel like you have to diffuse a situation, or like it doesn't feel like you have to defend yourself professionally or creatively, because it's exhausting. So don't do it. You're not going to stop people from giving you advice, but it's like, at least you have a little bit of like, all right, well, at least I'm vibing with this person, and they're going to give me something that's in line with my path, not trying to, persuade me from, to do something different, or dissuade me from what I'm doing or this thing that I'm trying, or because then if you risk nothing, you gain nothing. And this is a risky fucking endeavor. Whether it's, again, writing, acting, directing, anything in this industry is going to be its own version of rolling some type of dice, because nobody has it figured out unless you're like some type of nepo baby, or which, it's fine. You can't help who your parents are. But it's like nobody has it figured out. And the people that do have it figured out once felt like they didn't. So it could be a lot of things with that. So don't take that too serious. So when it comes to like good or bad advice, it all just really boils down to whatever works for you. Do you take the great advice from the person who's been there, done that? Sometimes that doesn't always pan out either, because there are aspects of that that might not work for what you're doing. And even if it's in line with everything that you're doing, you have to also be able to carve your own way in what you're doing as well, because it might not work out for you the same way it worked out for that person, no matter their success or not, no matter what type of accolades they could speak to. I know you hear it all the time. I mean, just going on, social media, you're going to hear, and this shit makes me sick. The 10 things you need to do to be a successful actor, and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's all horseshit. It's horseshit in the sense that, like, there's no formula for the most part. For the majority of people, there's no formula. You're going to do what you need to do in the moment that you need to do it, and hopefully you learn from it. Hopefully you're able to turn that into something. Turn it into something that you get noticed by or because of. And I'm not talking about like some sort of like gimmick or anything like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about genuinely hard work, creative work that speaks to other people, that is also in line with how you want to portray yourself or curate your own kind of work, so that other people could consume it, see it, enjoy it. You could have dialogue about it. Those are the things that really, really just click. They make sense. It's a good conversation to have. So don't worry about good advice, bad advice, whatever it is. It could go in either direction. Even if it starts as good or bad, it might flip and might be something completely different. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes it's like, well, that started off as a great idea and then it kind of turned to shit. Or vice versa. Like, oh man, that was like a really shitty piece of advice, but it got me thinking. So that's why I say, like, it's not all bad. It's just how you receive information ultimately. Because you could have a situation where you're like, man, that was like garbage, or that was great, and then it just flipped. And then you could, and there's everything in between. There's bad that stays bad, and good that gets better in terms of advice. So bounce it around to people you trust. Have a heart-to-heart moment with yourself, firstly, because that's going to be the first and last person, yourself, that is going to give you the best or worst advice. And it could also, taking your own advice could also lead to good and bad things. So, and that's why it also gets superseded for me to ultimately, it's whatever works. Don't spend your money on bullshit like 10-step plan for actors or writers or directors. There are things that are out there that you could leverage and get with other professionals and other creatives that sometimes cost money, depending on what it is. If you're trying to get some education, some continuing education for any of those topics, paths, and you should, because you have to be able to grow. You can't stay current if you're stagnant with stuff that you learned, I don't know, 5, 10 years ago, and you still think that that's like working. No, it's probably not going to work. Nothing is going to stay the same progression wise. It's just like it's going to pass you by. You have to stay relevant with what's going on. Social media has a lot of pitfalls, but just try to stay current with what you're trying to portray. And again, I realize that this is all advice at the same time, but my advice is that just kind of take advice with a grain of salt and just use whatever works. Because I know damn sure that I have been on the receiving end of both good and bad advice, and you would be surprised how it tends to take its own life. It becomes something that you often don't realize it's going to turn into, like all great things. And I don't mean like if it doesn't turn out perfect, that it's not a good thing, because again, that is also set in front of you to teach you a lesson, and that's very important. So take that all with a grain of salt, just like this podcast. This topic advice is it's all whatever works. It's going to be labeled advice, but I don't know. Part of me wants to say it should just be called whatever works. Maybe it'll be advice, or advice, whatever works. So I think that's everything I have for today. So hope everybody had a great day, 4th of July week, whatever, if you're in the beginning or the middle of your work week or anything like that. I know that a lot of stuff is slow in the industry right now. And for those that are seeing a lot of work, or some work, if at all, I hope that continues, and I hope it gets better, because there's my advice is never become a person that's bitter because other people are working, because that just doesn't make sense. Since we're on the topic of advice, and it's always going to turn into, and I'll leave you with this, it's always going to turn into like, well, I'm jealous because this person's working, and blah blah blah. Like, no, that's bullshit. That's just jealousy, and jealousy is horrible. Because if you go to the supermarket, I always love this analogy, and I finally get to use it. If you go to the supermarket and you go to the bread aisle, all of those companies, you may have your favorite type of bread, so to speak, unless you are gluten intolerant, but whatever. It's not about you people. But you're going to see a whole bunch of companies that make bread. So it's not all one bread company. So you might see that there's that's called famine thinking. And that's horrible. So my advice is, don't be a famine thinker when it comes to that particular thing. There's plenty of work for everybody. I know that the industry is going through a lot right now. I do not pretend to know hardly anything about that. I'm on the come up too, just like a lot of us. So, and I will definitely report back when it comes to things that I experience, and that's kind of part of what I do. This podcast has always been partially a journal, and also what advice would I give myself, because people are really easy to give advice that they don't take themselves. So I try to be open and honest with myself about any shortcomings and any advice that I would think that would be constructive to myself and useful at that time, even if it's uncomfortable. So I think that's everything. Again, I will wrap this up, and we're on to my favorite part of the show, where I get to slate. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. That's a wrap.